Hi, I'm Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography based here in beautiful, sunny Naples, Florida. Now for something a little bit different. You're a micro four thirds shooter and you really want a fast telephoto zoom lens with a shallow depth of field. Because as nice as the current line of f2.8 telephoto lenses are for the micro four thirds cameras, and they only give you a full frame depth of field equivalent of about f5.6, which renders the out of focus backgrounds blurry, and it does a nice job of isolating your subject. However, because of the small size of the sensors in the micro four thirds cameras, they really can't render the backgrounds into that creamy, silky smooth butteriness that we all crave. It's one of the few drawbacks of the micro four thirds cameras. We accept it because we really like the smaller profiles and the lighter weight of the micro four thirds system. But if you really crave a shallow depth of field to your images, then there is another option out there, and it's not new, it's not small, and it's not cheap. But it works quite well on your Olympus OMD EM-1 with full autofocus and EXIF data. So, is it worth it? Let's find out. Back before the runaway success of the Olympus OMD line, Olympus had a line of cameras and lenses for their legacy 4/3 system. 4/3 is basically a camera system with the same size sensor as micro 4/3, but the 4/3 system cameras had a mirror box, and the cameras themselves looked and felt more like traditional DSLRs. In addition to this line of cameras, Olympus also had a line of lenses for the 4/3 system. Lenses that received a lot of accolades for their awesome build quality and optical excellence. Well, with the advent of the mirrorless micro 4/3 OMD line of cameras, Olympus moved on from the 4/3 system, but they left a lot of really nice lenses in their wake. One of those lenses is the unique 35-100mm f2 lens. Now, this lens isn't new. In fact, it debuted way back in 2003, but the lens is renowned for its build quality, wide constant aperture, again it's f2 in a zoom, and optical prowess. Olympus, of course, not really wanting to completely abandon their legions of legacy 4/3 users, made the decision to make these lenses adaptable to the OMD EM-1 camera with an adapter. Now, unlike the rest of the OMD line, the EM-1 has a phase detect chip for autofocus which can be used with these legacy lenses. Well, if you want to get one of these, there are a lot of compromises here, and you really have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Because how far would you go to get f2 in a telephoto zoom for your micro 4/3 camera? Okay, so first up is build quality, and Olympus didn't compromise here. This thing is built like a tank, and it's weather sealed, and it's heavy. Tipping the scale at 1,650 grams, or just over 3.5 pounds. That's really chunky. Keep in mind though, this is an f2 zoom lens, so it's going to take a lot of glass to make that wide aperture possible, especially in a zoom. On the inside, there are 21 elements in 18 groups, and the optical formula includes 1 super ED lens and 4 ED lens elements. The aperture ranges from f2 to f22, and the minimum focus distance is a longish 4 feet and 6 inches away, making shooting in tight quarters a real challenge. The focus ring is really smooth without a lot of resistance, and the zoom ring offers more resistance, and its movement is actually noticeably audible. And lastly, the front filter thread is 77mm. Now, apart from the fact that it's really heavy, making hand-holding for extended periods of time a challenge, it's a really great effort. So for build, the 35-100 f2 gets a solid 9.5 out of 10. So up next is AF speed and accuracy. Well, it's reasonably fast and reasonably accurate, but it's also noticeably buzzy and it's very audible. In fact, I'm not sure I'd want to use this lens in a quiet setting like, say, a church, because it just may in fact disrupt the sereneness of the ceremony. And truthfully, it's one of the really big disappointments with this lens, because it does otherwise focus quickly and mostly accurately. But at this price point, you would figure there'd at least be a silent focus motor in there. There isn't. In fact, it sounds something on the order of a buzzy 50mm f1.8 from Canon, but let me just demo this so you can see what I'm referring to. The beep is on, and I'm just going to start pointing and shooting. Here we go. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad either. But to sum it up, it's fast and accurate, but it's really noisy, and again, I wouldn't want to use it in a setting where it may become a distraction from the event. So for AF speed and accuracy, we give the 35-100 a 7.5 out of 10. So next up is optical quality and the quality of the results. For all of its faults, at the end of the day, it's about the results. and the result is where the 35-100 shines. It's optically excellent and is capable of razor-sharp imagery. The f2 aperture goes a long way to give us a nice out-of-focus background that would be similar or would give us a similar look and feel to a 70-200 f4 lens on a full-frame camera, which is to say the lens has the capability to render out-of-focus backgrounds beautifully with creamy smooth bokeh. Now, if the lens has one optical weakness, it'd be its performance against really bright light. I found the flare to be really noticeable, and in a sense, it's actually almost out of control. But truthfully, unless you have no choice, you're probably not going to be shooting directly into the sun anyway. But that was about the most major flaw that I could find. However, as with all of my reviews, rather than me talking up the image quality, it's probably better if I just show you the image quality. The next 2 minutes or so will be a series of stills and video clips showcasing the optical goodness of the Olympus 35-100mm f2 lens. And optically, this lens is a winner. So last up is value. And unlike a lot of lenses, this is a huge sticking point for the 35-100 f2. On the one hand, you have a constant f2 telephoto lens, which as far as I'm aware, is one of the few telephoto zoom lenses to have a constant wide aperture or wider aperture than f2.8. So in that sense, it's a really unique offering, but boy, does it come at a price. If you're an OMD user, the lens is only compatible with the most expensive in the OMD line, the EM-1. And at $2,399 new, this lens is not cheap. In fact, it's priced like the 70-200 f2.8 Mark II offerings from both Canon and Nikon. Granted, it's f2, but it's also f2 in a micro four thirds sensor, which is great for faster shutter speeds and low light, but it still only renders out-of-focus backgrounds and gives you a similar depth of field to an f4 lens on a full-frame camera. To make matters worse, not only is the lens expensive, but you also have to buy an adapter to make it work with your EM-1, and at a cost of $160 more. Lastly, if you're a wedding shooter, if you're going to shoot a wedding in a small indoor chapel or an enclosed quiet space, think long and hard before you invest in this lens, as the audibility of the focus motor can, and most likely will, be a distraction. Now, if you're willing to accept all of that to get f2 and a telephoto zoom on your micro four thirds camera, then I think the decision is up to you. But to me, I think I'd rather invest in a Metabone speed booster for a lot less money and give me more of my lenses a wider aperture setting on more than just my EM-1. Now don't get me wrong, the 35-100 is optically brilliant, but Olympus sure is asking a lot to take advantage of it. So for value, the 35-100 gets a 5 out of 10. Okay, so to wrap up this review of the Olympus 35-100mm f2 lens, we gave it a 41 out of 50 and a recommended rating. The final word. If you really want an f2 lens for your OMD EM-1, then the only real native option out there is the Olympus 35-100mm f2 lens, which offers great optics and stellar build, but at a really stiff premium. Factor in the buzzy focus motor, and you can pretty much cast aside quiet event settings, unless you want to become a huge distraction and the talk of the event, and not necessarily in a positive light. Speaking for myself, I probably wouldn't buy this lens. It's nice, but it sure does ask for a lot of compromises for the folks who are interested in obtaining one. This is Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, based here in beautiful, sunny Naples, Florida. If you like these reviews, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next time, happy shooting.